Oh, hello and welcome back to Automotive Tales. On today's episode, we're going to talk about big cats. So today's date is the 19th of November, and the reason I've said that and the reason I'm recording this video today is that Jaguar has launched their rebrand. This morning, a new video came out on their Instagram page and across their social media, and a new face to their website with an all-new brand. So we see the Jaguar name all in lowercase in sans serif, with the exception of the letter G, which appears to have remained as a capital, which is a bit unusual. And this has caused a furore across social media. And I thought this was a really interesting talking point. So I thought I'd make a little bit of a video to try and understand what's going on with Jaguar and try and unpick all of this a little bit and see if we can understand what's led to this slightly strange and bewildering marketing video. Okay, so you would be forgiven for thinking you've just seen an advert for a clothing brand, H&M maybe, or even for a perfume brand. But no, this is the launch on social media of the new Jaguar branding. The Jaguar, the car company, is definitely Jaguar Cars, FYI. So no cars feature in the advert. It's a very colourful, creative advert. In fact, they do say they are teaming up with a series of creatives to build a platform to launch this new brand. I don't really know what that means. I'm an engineer. This doesn't really kind of sync with me, but let's have a look into it and try and understand what's going on. So first of all, we've got an all lowercase Jaguar logo, with exception to the letter G, which appears still to be in capitals, which is a bit bizarre. And we have a new slogan, copy nothing. In fact, I'm just going to scroll through the website to read what goes with that. We're here to delete ordinary, to go bold, to copy nothing is exactly what it says. So some strong words, but what on earth does that mean? Well, they're clearly trying something new. And before we get into whether that's good, bad or indifferent, I want to try and kind of understand what's led to this. What is going on? Why are Jaguar rebranding? What is a rebrand of a car company all about? We haven't really seen much of this before. So I guess to really understand what's going on, we should start right back at the beginning and we should have a little bit of a look at Jaguar's heritage, because ultimately we need to understand the backstory to understand what's happening going forward. So Jaguar was started in 1935, so this is a 90-year-old company, or it will be in 2025, which is when they're planning on having their whole new EV range, I guess hence launching on the 3rd of December. So what does that heritage hold? Well, ultimately a series of road cars and race cars that have really stood out and stood the test of time. So some serious metal in the XK series of cars, the C-Type and D-Type, they took racing to Le Mans, and probably the most famous of all is the E-Type, which was their super sports car in the 50s and 60s, or XKE if you're over across the pond in Trumpland. And alongside that, they were notorious for making cars with grace, pace and space. So four-door executive saloons that really were setting the benchmark for comfort, for performance and for overall luxury. So a strong start for a brand. Moving into the 70s, they continued with the sports cars. So the sports car theme evolved with the XJS. That platform was then refreshed in the 90s when it was a bit long in the tooth with the XK8, which actually the underpinnings of which weren't vastly different, but was a completely new design and style language for Jaguar. And that happened under the Ford era. So in the 90s, Jaguar became part of something called the Premier Automotive Group, which meant it was alongside Land Rover, Volvo and Aston Martin. So Jaguar and Land Rover have been bedfellows for quite a long time now. During this period, Jaguar continued to make cars in both the saloon market and the sports car market, but certainly started to lose out against the Germans. So the big players of BMW, Audi and Mercedes really started to dominate that market in the 80s and 90s, slowly pushing Jaguar further and further out. And it sort of gained a bit of a reputation for producing, I guess, slightly repetitive, old man, lazy styling sort of cars. The XJ evolved a little bit over the years, albeit I think the X350 is a really quite nice looking car, even though it's sort of the end of that line of evolution. They developed a few more cars. The XK8 became the XKR, but eventually Ford gave up on Jaguar, and in 2008 it was sold to Tata. And this brought in a new era for Jaguar. Tata invested an awful lot of money in new design, new styling and new platforms. The first of which was the XF and the XE. So the XE being the baby Jaguar, so going after the sort of 3 Series market rather than traditionally the 5 Series market, which is where they aimed with the XJ. We've got the XF that sort of sits in between those two, and a new sports car. So the XK continued on a new platform for a few years before then being replaced eventually by the F-Type, which was supposed to be the spiritual successor for the E-Type, but time will tell on that. But the big change then came in 2017-2018, where we saw a couple of new completely new markets really for Jaguar. The first of those was the EPace and the FPace, so a small and a large SUV, which looked to me at least to be rebranded Land Rover products, which then meant they sort of were competing with themselves. At this point they were formed as Jaguar Land Rover and producing SUVs in both brands, which doesn't really make an awful lot of sense. And as a result, I don't think the sales on either of those cars was particularly strong. But one thing did come out in 2018 that was quite interesting. So Jaguar was a very early adopter of the fully EV platform, and in 2018 they launched something called the Ipace. So new platform, fully EV with an Ian Callum designed body on it, which was quite a departure from Jaguars of old. Very short bonnet, sort of cab forward type design, because it wanted to sort of segregate it in terms of styling from everything that was internal combustion. And unfortunately, it didn't seem to grip the market. It had everything. It was a neat new design. It was a good platform. It was from a good reputable brand, but it just didn't seem to take off. The likes of Tesla seemed to have really won over in that market, and more recently some of the sort of Japanese, South Korean and now the Chinese brands are really taking over in the electric car market. So in 2001, Jaguar made a statement to say they were going to go all electric by 2025. Come 2024, they are still producing cars. Sales have dropped off quite significantly, and they decided to stop production of all internal combustion cars, presumably because the evolution of the EV range has been going on in the background. Come summer, we see sales stop in America, and more recently, about a month ago, we saw sales of Jaguar vehicles stop here in the UK. And that's because Jaguar's decided they need a bit of a fire break. They want a complete cut from the old brand, and they're going to launch a completely new brand. And that brings us to where we are today. So we have a new brand. We don't quite know where it's going yet because there aren't any cars featured in the first advert we've seen. However, last week we did see some spy shots of some of those new cars being tested out and about on the roads. Maybe they were put out on purpose to be snapped. This feels very sort of 90s sort of automotive espionage, something that I'm sure Richard Porter from Sniff Petrol is really enjoying. This appears to be his favourite thing. In fact, he went out to try and get his own spy shots only a couple of weeks ago on his podcast and failed to see anything of a spy nature, but good on him for trying. It seems that the automotive spy culture is still sort of alive and kicking there somewhere. But what does this tell us? What do we know? Well, we know there are some new models in production. I have a friend that works there who has reliably informed me that an awful lot of time, effort and energy is going on in the background, not just on the marketing, but to actually design these new vehicles. So we're hoping they're going to come in with another Ipace type step change in their design and their technology to really give them a sort of a one-up and hopefully take some market ground. But this advert, I can't get away from this advert. We're confused of what that means. What is the rebrand? So I thought I'd try and unpick things a little bit and think, well, if I was a marketer, marketing expert, whatever term they use, what would you do with Jaguar? And in fact, before I dig into this, bleep bloop in the comments below. What would you have done with Jaguar if you were given the job of rebranding Jaguar into a fully EV brand? So I wanted to break this down a little bit because I think there's a couple of options for how you might approach this. First of all, you could start to look back at the heritage. So that's why I wanted to go through the history of Jaguar, because it's a brand with a huge amount of heritage. But would that really work in the world of EVs? Because nothing in the internal combustion heritage really suits that kind of future of the company. Do you maybe go with something that sits halfway in between, some sort of retro type look back with an EV bent to it? You know, look at what Faye have done with the 500e, building on their kind of retro style 500, which looks back to the early 60s 500, as BMW did with the Mini back in the early 2000s. But to me, that feels a bit pastiche, it's a bit overdone, although ironically the sister brand Land Rover has sort of done that a little bit with the Defender, which wasn't received very well at first, this kind of new look, trying to kind of be a bit styled like the old Defender, but on a completely new platform with sort of modern proportions. But ironically, after the initial backlash of the Defender, it is now one of their best-selling models. In fact, I'm led to believe they can't build them quick enough on the production line. So maybe that would be the way to go, but it doesn't feel right when you look at the Jaguar brand versus the Land Rover brand. The Land Rover brand is not moving away from its internal combustion engine's route just yet. There are some sort of EV models and some hybrid models coming into the range, but they didn't have to do that sort of step change from internal combustion to a fully EV brand. So what about looking at the racing heritage then maybe? Clearly, Jaguar have had presence in racing for years. They raced at Le Mans. They even did a stint in Formula One. And more recently, they've got involved with Formula E. So they're actually committed, I believe, to Formula E right out to 2030. So maybe that's an avenue you would play into. And that's, I think, probably where I would go. But looking at what we've seen so far from the brand, albeit this is only one advert and the front page of the website, this doesn't feel like a very motorsport brand. We've got very sort of soft and colourful visuals with the, you know, the sans serif lettering, and this sort of very stylised capital G with some interesting graphic designs, maybe very simplistic graphic designs, looking more at the kind of fashion industry. So I'm not seeing a link there with motorsport, or with, I guess, racing sport, because it's not motorsport, is what I guess an electric motor. So maybe that'd be an option. Doesn't seem to be where this is going. What other things could you do? Well, grace, pace and space. What about the grace aspect? Never mind the pace or the space. Could you double down on the luxury? Obviously, Jaguar has a heritage of producing luxury vehicles, so maybe you could pitch this rebrand in somewhere above the competition, try and outpace Mercedes and BMW and go for the sort of super luxury market. There's a bit of a gap between those big three German brands, and then sort of Bentley and Porsche up here, and then above that sort of Rolls-Royce. And Bentley don't seem to have an all-electric offering that I'm aware of. I'm sure there might be something in the pipeline, and somebody will bleep bloop in the comments below with what that is. And certainly Rolls-Royce in the SUV market and in the sort of more run-of-the-mill vehicles they're doing don't seem to have much of a sort of standard EV offering. So maybe that would be the option, but that I would expect to be sort of more subtle, a bit more in line with sort of the previous advertising we've seen from Jaguar, which built a bit of a reputation for the British bad boy. The Jaguar seemed to always be driven by the baddie in the film, you know, people in pinstripe suits in London with blacked out Jaguars doing shady deals, etc., etc. But that doesn't seem to be the vibe in fact, it couldn't be any further from the vibe we're getting for this new brand. So those are my three options. What other options do you think you could have done? What do you think's led them to this? If we can't use doubling down on luxury, we can't use racing heritage, we're not going to use its sort of its general automotive heritage and do something pastiche and retro. What could you do with this brand? What would you do with this brand? I'm excited to see where they're going to go with it. I'm not sure I fully get what's going on yet, but ultimately, whatever they're doing, it's sort of working, because I'm sitting here talking to a camera about it. Presumably, if you're watching this, well, you've searched for this or you're interested in this. Social media appears to be alive with people talking about this. And I would highly recommend going and look in the comments section, because there's some comedy gold in there that shows the enthusiast market really doesn't quite get what's going on here, Jaguar. But maybe all will be revealed soon. So we've got 2 weeks before the proper reveal on the 3rd of December. Fingers crossed this is a bright and exciting future for Jaguar. I'm not sold so far. But, you know, 2 weeks is a long time in marketing and in social media world. So let's see what they come up with. Okay, so that's all I really wanted to cover on this episode. I just kind of wanted to open a bit of a conversation about this. This is clearly going to be a big step change for Jaguar, and something that I suspect other automotive brands, certainly European-based brands, are going to be watching very closely, because there's a few that are going to have to make the leap at some point, and are going to have to either offer more focus on their EVs, or they're going to have to do a wholesale relaunch with an EV brand and take the fight to the likes of the Chinese brands, which are starting to dominate the EV market and potentially going to put a lot of these European brands out of business. So if Jaguar is successful, maybe this will be the blueprint for other European automotive brands. If it falls flat on its face, well, maybe it's back to the drawing board for the automotive industry. Only time will tell. Right, thank you for watching, and do get involved in the comments and on social media. Tell us what you think about this new advert. What would you have done? But also, what's your favourite Jaguar? What is it that this is going to be juxtaposed for you? Is it the E-Type? Like me, I adore the E-Type. Or is it something more modern? Do you like the X350? Maybe like the XF? Maybe like one of the XJs? Maybe you're an F-Type person? Let me know in the comments below. Right, that's all for this episode of Automotive Tales. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I wasn't kidding when I said the comments were comedy gold. Let's have a look at some of the stuff here. So one of them, Jaguar, was your account hacked? Are you okay? Another marketing company completely out of touch with reality. Bit harsh, but you know. I just followed again so I can unfollow. Brutal. Grace space palm face. I like that. It's funny. For fuck's sake, Dave, did you spike the coffee in marketing with acid again? Clearly the enthusiasts are not loving this.